welcome to this week's episode of the Dadcast. And I'm going to kick off the Dadcast with some sad news for us wrestling fans out there. Our man, Psycho Sid Vicious, unfortunately passed away today. I saw the news of that right before I came up here to start recording this. So just wanted to give my condolences to his family, and it's a sad loss. Sid was always one of my favorite heels in the 90s. I thought he was great when his first WWE run happened as a good guy at first, because he was another one of those Vince handpicked, I'm going to replace Hogan, but then Hogan's not retiring, so we got to do something with this big buff dude, and they turned him heel at the Rumble, the one in which Ric Flair won to win the WWE Championship, WWF Championship, and then he feuded with Hogan briefly. I thought that was a great heel move for Sid. Though technically Hogan should have been the heel there. Sid eliminated Hogan, and then Hogan distracted Sid so that Flair could eliminate Sid. So that's kind of a dick move on Hogan's part. Hogan, as usual, was the heel, but for some reason celebrated as the good guy. And I'd like to say I was a smart mark back then, but I was not. I was like, F Sid, go Hogan, Hulkamania running wild. So that was kind of his first run in WWE, and then he came back later as Shawn Michaels' bodyguard to replace Diesel when Diesel became a face, but Shawn stayed a heel. Then, of course, famously after WrestleMania 11, he turned on Shawn and powerbombed the hell out of him, which Diesel came and made the save, turned Shawn face, which set forth us to WrestleMania 12. But Sid was a great heel for Shawn Michaels. Another big man for HBK to overcome on his face run. And then, of course, all of his work in WCW. Just, I want to say almost always a heel in WCW. Every once in a while, Sid Justice. He was a face. But no, always loved him as a kid. One thing I loved about Sid, and it's not really articulated on the figure, but his traps, man. He kind of looked like a person piloting like a giant dude mech suit, because his traps were so massive that it kind of looked like a small person in a big person suit, kind of thing like that. It always amazed me as a kid, like those traps. That's why I like whenever I load up the barbell to do shrugs or face pulls, I always load up with a lot of weights because like I want Sid traps. But he also famously would take the summer off to play softball in like men's softball leagues. So Sid, we salute you. Kampai. We pour a drink out for you, Sid. May you rest in peace. And yeah, Psycho Sid passed away today, Monday, August 26, 2024. Sid, we will miss you. Great heel. But off from the sad news to kind of more sad news, but not in the same kind of sad news, a different kind of nostalgic sad news. I wanted to do this podcast about Toys R Us. Earlier today I watched a Pixel Dan video where he was talking about in his travels came across a Toys R Us at the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, a airport I'm quite familiar with. I have a lot of layovers there. I've flown to directly to Dallas once to go to WrestleMania 32, but I've had several layovers at Dallas-Fort Worth. It's a lovely airport, by the way. Terrible football team, but lovely airport. And he's on his last layover there, he came across a small little Toys R Us, which was kind of terrible. It was just like mostly Funko Pops. It had a couple like old Transformers. By old, I mean last year, not like 80s Transformers. That would be awesome. And then like some Star Wars figures. Star Wars figures, just your regular old Black Series that were $40. And yeah, so it's kind of like he was kind of talking about how Toys R Us is never really going to come back. Like, that's probably what it's going to be. It's going to be in Macy's and a few malls and places like that. And Toys R Us is just never going to be the Toys R Us we once knew. Even though I've been to Toys R Us in Japan, it's the Toys R Us we once knew. Canada still has Toys R Us. I'm sure other places around the world still have actual Toys R Us. If they're in Japan and Canada, I'm sure other places do. I think like South Korea has them too. I think I've seen posts on the internet from different figure people about South Korea and Toys R Us. But it was one of those things, it got me thinking. It's like, why can't we have another Toys R Us? It's one of those brands that people want, and it doesn't have to be this like mall thing. It can be what it once was, a big box department store. I worked for it. It was a great work experience. I still say it's been over 20 years since I last worked for Toys R Us, and I still say it was the best job I ever had. Pay wasn't great, but it was a lot of fun. I worked in action figures, go figure, and also every once in a while I worked in the R Zone, which is where they sold their video games and things like that. So it was a blast, and I'm going to share some of those memories within this podcast. But I want to talk about why can't Toys R Us come back, if you think about it, because Toys R Us as a brand didn't fail. Secret Galaxy, I believe, did a nice little breakdown on this, and KB Toys, Pixel Dan and Secret Galaxy. I will link those videos in the description. But he did Dan Larson, Pixel Dan and Dan Larson, both doing videos on Toys R Us, which kind of inspired this podcast. They talked about it, and basically what had happened to KB Toys later happened to Toys R Us is like these hedge funds bought them as collateral. Basically, they bought the brands and things like that, and they used the profits from KB Toys, they used the profits from Toys R Us for other ventures, and those ventures failed, which bankrupted those companies, those holding companies that own Toys R Us, that own KB Toys. So again, KB Toys, Toys R Us, those did not fail as a brand. It was these holding companies that had them, that used the profits of Toys R Us, used the profits of KB Toys. Those failed, which bankrupted the one profitable outfit of these holding companies. So that got me thinking, it's like, why can't it come back? I mean, I don't have the money to bring it back. Elon Musk, if you're watching this, you have the money to bring it back. Elon, give me a call. I can run it for you. I've got experience with Toys R Us. I'll run it for you. Just bring it back. But I mean, I think it could come back if the right backer did it, like an Amazon, a Walmart, an Elon Musk, somebody with the capital to put up. Because like any big venture, any new business, any new store, it's not going to turn a profit right away, and a big box store like a Toys R Us is definitely going to be in the red. I don't know for how many years, but it's going to be in the red for a hot minute until you reestablish the brand, like reestablish big locations in big areas where it's going to make money, and then you just start raking in the money. You start raking in the profits, which, I mean, it might take long, but it might not take that long, because the toy market, I think, is desperate for a Toys R Us to come back. It doesn't have to be Toys R Us, a big box toy store chain to come back. I think it could work, mostly because I think the toy companies would definitely support it, because you got to think to like HasLab and Mattel collections, Mattel's kind of version of Hasbro Plus. They do these crowdfunding things for these big box items. We've seen Transformers, Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Marvel, WWE, WCW. They do these big crowdfunding things, and people kind of bitch about it, like, why am I crowdfunding a $1 billion company? The reason why you are is because Toys R Us doesn't exist anymore. There's not enough retail space in the one aisle of Walmart or 2 aisles of Target for action figures to put these big box play sets. It's something they could do with Toys R Us. They could put them out there and they could sell them, because we would go there and they could do like a limited run, and if they sell out, boom, you make more. You stock Toys R Us shelves with them, KB Toy shelves with them, because they're dedicated toy stores. They have multiple aisles dedicated to action figures. Like, shoot, when I worked at Toys R Us, we had a whole aisle of just Marvel figures. We had a whole aisle of the newer G.I. Joe stuff. We had a whole aisle of like wrestling figures and things like that. So you have multiple aisles, so you could put these big box things there, like the WCW Nitro stage, which did not fund crowdfunding of any kind of Star Wars barge, giant Transformer, Marvel Legends. I remember before Toys R Us closed, taking my son Sean, and we got him the Galactus. Now, granted, that Galactus is not quite as big as the HasLab Galactus, but that Galactus was still like this. You can't even see on the camera. It was at least 2.5, 3 feet tall, and you didn't see those at Walmart. In fact, I think it was a Toys R Us exclusive. You didn't see it at your Walmarts and Targets. You only saw those things at Toys R Us. So that's why we have to crowdfund these things, because there's not the retail space at a Target, at a Walmart to carry these big things. So they're not just going to produce a bunch of them to not sell them. So they do the crowdfunding thing, and if they hit their mark, they go into production. I kind of wish they would do more of a Super 7 thing, because the stretch goals are cool, but basically you're paying for the stretch goals whether the stretch goals don't get met or whether the stretch goals are not met. So you're still paying for the stretch goals even if they aren't met. So that kind of sucks. I would rather let's just pay for the product. We get the product, and then maybe you sell the stretch goal stuff individually, like especially with that nitro stage. We don't need the stretch goals. Just have the price of what that nitro stage is going to cost us, and then make the figures, because I'm pretty sure we've pretty much either got or getting all those WCW Ultimate figures. Though, like the Rey Mysterio, I've got him over there. We've got an Elite. I think Warrior in the jeans is coming in Elite. Scott Steiner is coming in Elite, but I have to assume we're getting a Scott Steiner Ultimate eventually. And DDP is coming in Elite, and we have several Ultimate Hulk Hogan's. One that you could use in your WCW shelf. So that's one of those things, like just knock out the stretch goals and just let us order, do like the Super 7 model. Hey, we've got to reach this goal. We're opening it up for a whole month. It's this price. And we're doing pre-orders. Once the pre-orders are done, it ships, kind of thing like that. That'd be a little bit better than what they're doing now. Those stretch goals are fun if they were free, but they're not free. We're paying for those. But yeah, that's why we have those crowdfunding things for those big items, because there's not the retail space for them. And there's also not the warehouse space at Hasbro or Mattel to just hold them if they don't sell. So they do the crowdfunding to make sure there is a market for that, as opposed to if there was a Toys R Us, Toys R Us would order it, they'd ship it out to Toys R Us, and it was up to Toys R Us to then sell and store them. So Mattel, Hasbro, all the toy companies would already have their money for those big ticket items, so they don't have to worry about it. It's Toys R Us who has to sell them at that point. So that's kind of like where it'd be nice if we had a Toys R Us, because then maybe we wouldn't see these crowdfunding things. The Monday Night Nitro stage, maybe your local Toys R Us would have like 3 or 4 of them, and you could grab them or what have you, and we would have that stage, which I did not back. I thought about it, I kept going back and forth whether or not I wanted to back it, but I don't have the room for the Nitro stage. I would have to create room. I'd have to buy a table just to set that thing up, because I'm out of retail space in my toy room for that particular item. But yeah, it would have been cool if that got produced, kind of thing like that. But without a Toys R Us, it's not going to get produced. It's going to be crowdfunded, and the thing about those crowdfunding things is it's got to hit that price point, because you have 30 days to buy it, and you buy it at the end of the crowdfunding. And sometimes people just don't have the money in that 30 days, whereas opposed to if those items hit retail shelves, it might sit for a couple months, or the first wave sells out, and then they do another wave, and then maybe you save 2-3 months down the road, you have that money for that big ticket item that you didn't have that first 30 days when it hits. So that's where we're kind of missing out on a Toys R Us. Also, just an option to go to. It's kind of like I have 2 Walmarts right within 5 miles of me. I've got 1 Target, and it's very rarely do those action figures thing change. Whenever I go to Walmart or Target to get other things, I stop by the action figure aisles just to check out to see if they've got anything new. And every once in a while they do a reset and they've got new things, but for the most part they don't. So it's gotten to the point I don't even toy hunt there. If I want newer figures, I tend to order them straight from Hasbro or Mattel, or Ringside Collectibles or Amazon. I order them offline, because toy hunting, when you're hunting for new toys, almost doesn't exist anymore, because maybe once a month Walmart or Target will put out new items, and it's one of those things, do they have them in the back, and they're not putting them out because the other items haven't sold yet, or are they just not getting the shipments? As when I worked at Toys R Us, and this was Toys R Us even after I had long left, even when I wasn't fig collecting, I'd go with my buddy who did fig collect, because I was just going to the Toys R Us, whether I took my kid to Toys R Us or just going with a friend who was figure collecting. It was just always fun to go into Toys R Us, just that feeling you get when you go to Toys R Us. Whenever I go to Japan, I make it a point to go by Diver City in Tokyo, because I know there's a Toys R Us there. I can go to a Toys R Us and it feels like Toys R Us. You go to that Toys R Us in Macy's, you're just in a toy section of Macy's that has a Jeffrey Giraffe in there. But the Japanese Toys R Us that I've been to feels like Toys R Us. You go in there, there's a T-Rex waiting for you, and it's just great. It feels like Toys R Us. And what's funny is, in the Japan one, you can't pick up the video games in a plastic case like you could at the US one. It's like way back in the old days of Toys R Us where you pick up the blue and yellow paper ticket and you take that to the register and they give you your game, which that even throws back nostalgia because when I was working at Toys R Us, we phased that out to where we had the games in plastic cases on the shelf. But I remember as a kid, you get that ticket, you take it up to the register, they'd go to the back, or not the back, they'd go to the front area where they kept the video games, and they gave you your video game, which was always, that was cool. That was kind of fun, like kind of thing like that. So seeing that at the Japanese Toys R Us in modern day was really cool. I've never been to a Canadian Toys R Us because honestly, I haven't been up to Canada since before Toys R Us closed. It's been a hot minute since I've been to Canada. I need to go back. I do enjoy Canada. It's a lovely country. People are so nice there. Good beer and things like that. So Canada, I'm coming to visit soon. I'm coming at you. Not in the winter though. We're getting to the end of summer. Maybe I'll make a fall trip, maybe a spring trip to Canada. Go up to Toronto. Haven't been to Toronto in years. So I'll definitely check out a Toys R Us while I'm up there. But yeah, just the missing of Toys R Us, I think, hurts the toy industry as a whole. And I'm not just talking about action figures for those of us who collect action figures, just in general, like my Walmart, and they just redesigned it to be like all the other Walmarts. It's a big Walmart. And it's got, if I'm just like thinking off the top of my head, maybe 6 to 8 aisles for toys. And they're kind of long aisles, so they're not small aisles, but that's still 8 aisles at the max, and I think it's more like 6 for toys. Is sad. It's really sad for kids these days. I mean, I know we've got our phones and our iPads and our video games for kids to occupy themselves with, but I get a kick out of watching Bowie play. He'll play with my real Ghostbusters figures up here, even though he has his own real. He literally has all the real Ghostbusters. He has more real Ghostbusters toys than I do at this point, and he still always just messes up my display of real Ghostbusters when he comes up here and hangs out in the room. He moves my firehouse around. He plays. I've given up on stopping this. He grabs my vintage Transformers and plays with them, my Optimus Prime, Starscream, Hot Rod, Soundwave, Bumblebee. He grabs those off my display, which is right over there, and starts playing with them. And I just like, it's one of those. It's frustrating because I got to clean it up afterwards and try to redisplay them. Which he's gotten to a point where he kind of puts them back on the shelf. It's cute. He's like, Daddy, I put these back for you. But watching him play with, just independently play and use his imagination with my vintage Transformers, He-Man figures, real Ghostbusters, and if you watch the last, what was I doing? One of my last countdown videos. He's playing with, you can hear him in the background playing with wrestling figures, and it's so adorable. He loves action figures. He loves playing with toys. And what sucks is, like, right now he loves Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes is his favorite wrestler. And if you check out my TikTok, which maybe I'll link here, I don't really know if I can link it. I'm not sure. TikTok is still kind of foreign to me. I post every once in a while. I got a couple videos of him singing Cody Rhodes' song and going, "What?" and yelling, "Whoa!" During Cody Rhodes' entrance. I'm trying to get Cody to see one of those and send him some free swag. But like I said, his favorite wrestler is Cody Rhodes. So it's like if a new Cody Rhodes, I want to get him a basic, or their what are they calling the base? Main event. A main event Cody Rhodes figure, which are like $11, $12, which is ridiculous. I remember when Sean was playing with the WWE Basics, they were $6.99, so they've doubled in price in, I don't know, the 10 years since I started buying WWE figures for Sean. But I want to get him a Cody Rhodes figure, and I don't want to buy an Elite, because I'm not buying a 3-year-old $20 action figure that he's going to break. So I want to get him a Cody Rhodes figure, and they're so hard to find right now. And it's not because they're rare, it's because, distribution among Walmarts and Targets. I checked the websites, and right now, like, the only place that has them is Ringside. That's got the main event Cody Rhodes. And no offense to Ringside, I love you guys. I buy a lot of my Elites and my Ultimates from you, but I'm not paying $17 for a Cody Rhodes main event figure that's going to be played with. Like, if it was like a figure I was going to display, maybe I'd think about it. I don't know, $17 for a basic figure is a bit much. So it's one of those things. Like, I don't have a big box retailer like a Toys R Us that I guarantee if I went to a Toys R Us, even some of the older Cody Rhodes basics, they probably still have on the shelves because they've got this large dedicated space for WB figures, so they can keep stuff around longer and not ship it off to an Ollie's or a Ross and kind of thing like that. So I could still find them because, you know, if you go to an Ollie's or a Ross, like I'll see people do toy hunts at an Ollie's and there's just rows and rows of like Star Wars, G.I. Joe, Marvel, wrestling, figures, stuff like that. I go to my Ollie's, it's the same freaking Eternals that have been there for 5 years now. Ollie's and Ross and stuff is always great. My Ross is terrible for figures. Like during Christmas time, you can go and do a little bit of toy hunting there, but any other time it sucks. I never get anything at my Ross or hardly ever at my Ollie's, so it's always kind of depressing. So I can't even go to those secondary stores to find stuff. But yeah, if there was a Toys R Us, I guarantee I could go to that Toys R Us, pop in, find a Cody Rhodes, either Knuckle Cruncher, whatever those little ones are, or the main event figure of Cody Rhodes, and grab that for Bowie, and he'd have a Cody Rhodes figure to play with. So it's just kind of one of those things, like, and I'm sure, and I can't think of any other toy brand, Bluey, just because Bowie doesn't watch all those things. He watches like T-Rex Ranch here on YouTube and Blippi on YouTube, and then he watches Wrestling with Me, and he watches the old 90s TMNT cartoon. He found that on YouTube, and he prefers that one over any other iteration. And then he also watches Real Ghostbusters and He-Man. So some of those things I can buy, some of those things I can't. Which also with He-Man, like the Origins line, that is kind of limping along. But I guarantee you, if there was a Toys R Us and we get a big section of He-Man Origins where you could carry He-Man and Skeletor and the basic figures, like the core figures, constantly, then that line might take off, especially with the cartoon on Netflix and things like that. But again, space is limited at Walmart. My Walmart has like 2 rows of pegs, one for Origins, and then one for, not Walmart, sorry, my Target. Well, both Walmart and Target actually have a peg for Origins and a peg for Revelations. That's it. That's all He-Man gets. Where I remember growing up, He-Man had a whole freaking aisle. And even when I worked at Toys R Us, the 2000X line, they still had like a quarter of an aisle. I mean, it wasn't as big as a toy line as it was in the 80s, but you still had the new figures, and then we had the retro versions, the retro carded classic He-Man figures. So it still had a good presence. I would say it had at least 6 peg rows, and then shelving space for the bigger play sets, kind of thing like that, which you don't get for Origins anymore, or He-Man Revelations. And then, like I said, Marvel had its own aisle. WWE had almost the whole aisle. I want to say it had about a half an aisle, things like that. So it's just, and Barbie had like at least 2 aisles and end caps and things like that. I don't go to the girls section that often because I have boys, I don't have girls. But even the girls section, when I walk by them, those are like 3 aisles total, and then you have like 2 aisles for like toddler toys and things like that. And it's just not enough for variety's sake to get your kids stuff for them to play with. Like, this is not even coming from a collector's point of view. This is coming from a father's point of view, which I've got a good dual perspective of the collector and the dad, kind of thing like that. And it does suck for both, because it sucks when trying to find your kids something that you know they want, and you just can't find it because the supply's not there. And then it also sucks as a collector when they haven't changed out the figures in a month. It's just the same like 5 peg warmers, which going back to when I worked at Toys R Us, my section was the action figures and bike section, which is what I was kind of in charge of. I had a manager who managed that whole side of the store, but it was kind of like that was like he just had me working mostly action figures when I would come to work, and I'd help with bikes if need be. I was mostly in action figures, and I would constantly, and maybe this is just a me thing, and we don't have these motivated people out of Walmart and Target in their toy sections, but I know I would do it if I was working there. I'd go into the back constantly and just go through boxes. Like, I remember I found a couple cases of ECW figures, and I took them out. We did not have a SKU for them anymore. I made a SKU, and I did them 2 for $5. Boom, boom, boom. Put them in a bin. Pulled a few out for me. I pulled, and this was after the San Francisco toy line had ended, so these had been back there for a hot minute. So I pulled them out. I kept Raven. I kept the Dudleys for me. I think Taz. Maybe Tommy Dreamer also. I'm just trying to think of who I kept. That's who I kept aside for me. And these were Cage Fresh, not even Hole Punch. I wish I still had them. But I did open them and display them and stuff like that with my collection at the time. But yeah, I put them $2 for $5 in a bin. Sold out with less than a week. Like, people came and got them. And that's what I was constantly doing. I was constantly going to the back and reshuffling our stock. Because if you have the same, like, 6 figures on the peg, no one's going to buy them. But if you put new stock out and you mix in those 6 figures, people start picking them up like, oh, I needed this figure. Since I'm here, I might as well grab that. Kind of thing like that. So it's just one of those things. I don't know if they don't have the stock in the back and they're not just putting it out because they are trying to sell what they have now. But yeah, I would constantly do that, and I would talk to my managers if we had like peg warmers. I'd like, hey, let's mark these down because we could do that. You can do, stores can do that. The managers can put stuff on clearance. I was like, these aren't selling. Let's mark them down, throw them in a bin, put them on an end cap. People will buy them. We do them like 2 for 10, 2 for 20, whatever the prices of the figures were, and we'd move that stock and then get new stock, put that out, fresh stock, more sales, kind of thing like that. And that's what Toys R Us was always good at. I know some people's Walmarts are good at that. I mean, I did a review on an LA Night that I guess Target didn't want anymore. I got it for $3.25. So hell of a clearance grab on that. But it's just, we need it as collectors. We need it as parents buying toys. Grandparents, you definitely need it because, oh man, some of the shit my mother buys my son, I'm like, why? This is just Chinese knockoff garbage. Call me and get my advice on stuff. Like, it doesn't have to be expensive stuff, but it's just like shit I gotta pick up that he's only gonna play with like 2 or 3 times. But my mom will never watch this, so I have no reason to. At least my mother-in-law lets Bowie sit with her on the iPad and pick out toys from Amazon, which is not smart on her part because she just got him some real Ghostbusters Playmobil stuff, and that has been discontinued for a hot minute. I know she didn't pay retail. I know she paid more than MSRP because last Christmas I was looking for some of those things for Bowie, and I was like, I ain't paying that price for that. But if we had a Toys R Us, sorry, there was some rum and coke on my beard. If we had a Toys R Us, some of those might still be on retail shelves, and you can get them for either retail or less than retail because they might be marked down because there's a bigger distribution, which I think that hurts Playmobil because I almost never see Playmobil in the retail space anymore. Like, every once in a while I do, but when I worked at Toys R Us, we did have, like, we had our Lego, we had like several aisles of Legos, and then like 2 or 3 aisles of Playmobil stuff, and those would fly off the shelves. Like, the only time I ever see Playmobil anymore is like those specialty toy stores that you see in like old towns, like that are right next to like 500 antique stores. But yeah, it's just it's missed. It hurts my soul, especially because I'm a former employee at Toys R Us, which yeah, so I mean, that's my kind of like thing. It's like Toys R Us is needed and it's wanted. It will succeed. We just need someone to do it, like a company to buy the naming rights to Toys R Us. Because I think a big box toy store could work regardless, but I think just the nostalgia for Toys R Us will get people in the door day one. If you did Toys R Us, maybe even KB Toy Stores, and Kitty City, that's a way back one for some of you older folks. But like a Toys R Us, or even like to a lesser extent KB Toy Stores. KB Toy Stores, you could probably do it in a mall, but you could do a big brick and mortar Toys R Us, and you could open a bunch of Toys R Us. Like, you wouldn't have to do, like, I don't like whatever this company who owns Toys R Us doing right now. Like, we're in a mall in New Jersey. No, Toys R Us mall Toys R Us has always sucked. Even when Toys R Us was killing it, those mall ones were just garbage. If you could just like pick out a couple test markets, like throw one near New York City, not in the city. Don't reopen the Madison Square Garden one, which me and a buddy, we helped set the pegs for that one. That was fun. But like near New York City, put one near Los Angeles, near Chicago, biased near Richmond or Washington D.C. Put one somewhere there, like some of the bigger cities. Like, maybe pick out 5 or 6 markets and put some big stores. I guarantee. Well, you gotta do Washington D.C. because that's where Toys R Us originated. Toys R Us originated in Washington D.C. You gotta do a Washington D.C. Toys R Us. I mean, that's just a no-brainer right there. But yeah, put them out there in some of the bigger markets, and I guarantee they're gonna kick ass. Or maybe even like look at Walmart and Target sales. Which Walmart and Targets, what areas sell the most action figures, sell the most like Barbie dolls, and maybe put them in a couple of those too, because those shoppers. Went over 30 minutes and my screensaver kicked on. I wish when the camera was rolling, it did do that. But yeah, put them in the markets where you see the most toy sales. I guarantee a lot of those toy shoppers are going to go to Toys R Us first, because that's what I always did. I know sometimes I'd pay a little more for Toys R Us, but there was a good chance if I went to Toys R Us, I was going to find what I was looking for, as opposed to Target and Walmart. And then for just the toy sellers, it gives them more options and more bargaining with like Walmart. If there's a Toys R Us raking in the toy sales, Target and Walmart have got to pick up their toy game. Because if you've noticed, since Toys R Us has gone under, Walmart and Target's toy sections have gotten smaller. Like I remember before Toys R Us closed down, my local Walmart had 2 aisles dedicated to action figures, maybe even 3, and a couple of end caps. And Target had multiple aisles dedicated just to action figures. And again, that's what I shop for. I didn't really notice the other stuff. That's what I was shopping for Sean and for myself, off and on collecting. So it's one of those things. I think it would do well for video games too, because if you notice, Best Buy, Walmart, Target, they've really lowered their stock on physical video games, and I'm a big physical video game person. I will buy digital games when they're on sale for a dirt cheap price, but I like my physical discs. I've got a shit ton. As you can see, all those damn Switch games down there, all those N64 games. I got a bunch of Xbox One games, PS5 games, Saturn, Dreamcast, PlayStation, DS, Super Nintendo that you just can't see because they're not in the display back there. But yeah, it's like that's what we need. That's what we need as just consumers and things like that. We need Toys R Us back, and we need it as parents to shop so we have more options. Because I hate shopping on Amazon for Christmas gifts, because it's one of those things like, am I going to get a repack? Am I going to get something in shitty condition? Because that has driven me insane about Amazon lately. The way they pack stuff when I order something, it's like, oh man, my nose itches. Sorry about that. Is I'll get figures that I'm going to open anyways, but the package will be mangled. And it's one of those things like, yeah, I'm going to open it, so it's not that big of a deal as long as the figure or whatever inside is good. But what if I'm giving that as a gift? I don't want to give a mangled package to somebody. Like if it's my kid's friend's birthday, or even to my own kid on Christmas, I don't want to give them a destroyed box. I want to give them something as near mint as possible, so it looks like I didn't just kick it around and shit like that. Which, you know, a lot of times I gotta order from Amazon, I gotta order from Walmart.com, I gotta order from Target.com, because my local brick and mortar stores don't have it. And so then I run the risk of how are they gonna pack it. Like recently, like my wife, Gutsy Little Mama, with her Bookstagram stuff, she orders a ton of books. Sometimes they come packaged neatly from Target, because she takes advantage of that buy 2 get 1 free sale that they're always doing on books, movies, and video games. And every once in a while I was like, hey honey, why don't you throw this movie in that for me? Like she'll have like an odd number, like, hey, I want this game, or hey, I want this movie, and she'll throw it in there for me, throw me a bone. But yeah, sometimes like the books will just come in like a bubble wrapper, and they'll be like paperback books, so they'll be torn to shit, and she returns them because, I mean, she wants them to sit on, like after she reads them, she wants them to sit on her bookshelf and look nice. And you just run that risk when you order them, because, you know, the person making minimum wage and the factory doesn't give a shit, or the packing factory doesn't give a shit. They're just tossing it in the box. And like a lot of times, like I've gotten figures that are in a box that's way too big for it, and maybe like a sheet of bubble wrap is thrown in there. Like the figure's not wrapped, they just throw it in there for some sort of padding. So yeah, so it's like I prefer to buy these things in person. Also, there's the thrill of the hunt. Like, yeah, I can go online or something, and I'll do that. And that's kind of fun for pre-orders, because like, oh, I gotta click, enter, sale. Because that's a little bit kind of fun and stress-inducing. But that's kind of the thrill of the hunt, because you got to get online, you got to get the thing, and you got to go forward. But you know, when things aren't pre-ordered, when figures are just hitting the shelves, like there is a bit of a fun going to the store and seeing if you can find them. Like for instance, when Star Wars Episode 1 came out, my buddy Jason and I, as soon as we got off school, hopped in my car, headed over to Toys R Us. This is before I worked at Toys R Us. I didn't work there until I was in college. Headed straight to Toys R Us to get the figures. And they just this big display. Like, shoot, I want to say like the display that they had out, not even like the main toy aisle, just the big display at the front of the store was like twice the size of my game room up here. It was huge. It was massive. And we were grabbing the figures that we wanted. We got Mace Windu. We got Qui-Gon. We got Obi-Wan. We got Darth Maul. We got Anakin. We got them all. And we left them all in the package because we thought they'd be worth money. I got a couple to open, but we were in that, these are going to be worth so much money. They're Star Wars kind of shit. But you don't really get that anymore. You'll get like a palette, like a little mailer palette of like WWE or Star Wars when they come out. And that's it at like a Walmart. And Target will do that sometimes, but mostly Target will just do like an end cap. And it's so underwhelming. There's not that thrill of walking in there and just seeing this massive display as soon as you walk in for the latest, greatest toy. And even if it wasn't something I was interested in, it was always cool when Toys R Us would do that reset for whatever new toy was coming out, and you would just see it there as soon as you walked in. You're like, that's awesome looking. And sometimes you're like, I kind of want to buy that. I'm not interested at all, but look at this display. I want to buy that thing. And you don't get that anymore, which I think, again, hurts the toy industry, which then hurts us collectors. It hurts us parents, because then our choices are limited as to what gets put out there, because, again, you only got 10 aisles, maybe at best, at a Walmart or Target find toys, instead of a giant store where you'd have a whole section of educational toys, whole section of Legos, whole section of action figures, Barbies, dolls, baby stuff, whatever you want, video games, which I do have some fun stuff about when I would have to sub into the R Zone. Some stories to tell. But yeah, so that's just kind of like my take on, I think it could work. And I think if you had like a Jeff Bezos, an Elon Musk, Walmart Holdings, whatever that's called, just, one of these billion-dollar companies, they could do it. They could run the risk. Shoot, Elon, man, you bought Twitter for $44 million, whatever the hell you bought Twitter for. That was a waste of fucking money. You could have bought the Toys R Us branding, set up a bunch of stores, and be raking that cash. And Elon, call me. We'll set this up. We'll get this to work, Elon. And if you want to tweet this video at Elon, maybe he will call me and put me in charge. That'd be awesome. Elon, I'll do it. I'll do it cheaper than any other CEO you could find to do it, and I'll do it better because I'll take personal accountability. Shoot, I got my Ask Iwata book there, and I would run that company like Iwata ran Nintendo. We F up, I'm taking responsibility for it. I'm not firing anybody. I'm taking a pay cut. That's how I would do it, because I would care, because I love toys, and I love like being a dad. I like seeing kids, being a dad, being a coach, I like seeing kids happy. Like, there's no other joy. Like, I've been coaching baseball for almost 20 years. Like, Sean's 16. I was coaching before he was born. I'll coach long after he's done playing. I'll be coaching Bowie. Nothing more exciting than seeing a kid succeed and just be happy. Like, I remember I had this one kid. I'm diverting from toys for a second, but I'm going to come back to some Toys R Us stories. I remember I had this one kid, just the nicest kid I've ever coached, one of my favorite kids I've ever coached. He wasn't very good at baseball, and this was at the lower levels. This was like, I coached him from like 8, 9 to 10 before he moved, and he got better every season, like progressively got better, but he just wasn't that good. But man, I remember when he got his first hit in that first season, it was like several games in, and he got that first hit, and he got the first base, and he was fast too. Like, just, that was one thing. Like, when we got him on base, whether he walked or got a hit, he was going to score, because we were going to have him steal second, he was going to steal third, and then it being Little League, there was going to be a bad pitch, he was going to get home. But just the smile on his face when he got to first base, just so heartwarming. Just like as a dad, it's like me walking downstairs with my kids when they're little on Christmas Day to see all those presents. She was just so happy, and that's just one of those things. Like, if you're not a dad or an uncle or an aunt or a mom, you'll get that feeling one day. You'll have kids of your own, or at the very least like nieces and nephews, and you will see that light up on their face when they've accomplished something, or they get a present, or a toy that they really love, and it's the best feeling in the world. And that's what the world is missing without a Toys R Us right now. But yeah, so yeah, just seeing kids happy, seeing collectors happy, and we all just would have more choices and be more fun for everybody. I think that would be great. But yeah, so before I close out, I'll share some fun Toys R Us stories with you. I got in trouble several times because if I couldn't find a ladder, I would climb the shelves to get stuff down. I did this in the back room a lot where we had the really heavy duty shelves that could hold like a ton. I'd just be climbing up there like a stupid little monkey or Spider-Man and getting boxes down. And I would like set up like a crash pad so I could just like grab boxes, like hang with one hand, grab box with the other hand, and just toss it on my little crash pad down there so I wouldn't damage what was in there. And I would only toss things down that I knew could take it, like I wasn't throwing any electronics or anything like that off the top shelves down. But yeah, I would constantly do that because I wanted to refresh my stock. I wanted new things out there. I put like a couple of the peg warmers up in overstock and move them down once we sold more stuff. But I constantly wanted fresh stock out there because the more fresh stock I had out there, I felt I would sell, and we did sell. Another fun story: when the GameCube was launching, I had my GameCube reserved, and we had these giant Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse plushes. They were like 3 feet tall. They were like those big ones you'd win at a carnival, but they were quality. And I don't know if you can hear the thunder. It's storming out there. There's a lot of thunder going on. But they were like the really good quality ones that were really soft and like really squishy. And if you spent like $50, you got one for free or something like that. So I was like, well, I'm buying a GameCube. That's $250. I want my free freaking Mickey. But it was Christmas season. They were just going on like that. So I threw one in the bag for myself. And I was like, for Josh, don't effing touch it. And so the day the GameCube came out, I didn't wait in the freaking line. I went into the store because I worked there. And I was off that day. I took off that day for a reason. I just went in there in front of the line, got my GameCube. But I had to wait till the store opened up before I could buy it. So I was just first in line to buy my GameCube. So outside of midnight launch, I was one of the first person on the East Coast to have one. And I had my Mickey with me because I was giving that as a gift to my little niece for Christmas that year. And my boss, our manager, was like, Josh, where'd you get that? I was like, I've had that back there for like 2 months now. And he was like, yeah, a lot of customers are asking for that. And I was like, oh, sucks for them. And I left because Norm was a pushover. He was overall a nice guy. Hated closing with him because he was the store manager. Everything had to be perfect if he was closing. And my section always stayed perfect because of my department manager, Jeff. He never let them train me on register, so because he always wanted me in the department to either sell figures, sell bikes. So he never anytime they try to train me on register, he'd like call me. He's like, I need Josh for this. I got to show him how to do this thing. So I never learned how to run register at Toys R Us. So my section was always perfect because I was always stocking it. If there were no customers in my section, if I wasn't helping anybody, I was always stocking my section, always keeping it clean, going up, getting my reshop, putting it back. Not because I was very vigilant, but because I took pride in my section, mostly because I loved action figures and stuff like that. So I took a lot of pride in it. So I wanted it to be perfect. And so just waiting on every other section to be done when we close, and then Norm with his freaking white glove checking for dust, being hyperbolic there. But it felt that way. Oh, that was loud thunder. But yeah, he was just like, customers asking for that. Do we have any more? I was like, probably not. This one's mine. And I had my coupon, got my free Mickey, gave that to my niece Emily for Christmas that year. And then speaking of Norm, I got hired on my interview. I applied for the job. My 2 buddies came with me for the interview, but they didn't like hang out. They went looking around the store because that's a bad look. Don't bring your friends to an interview unless it's at a big place and they can just go fuck off while you're doing your interview. And I come out, he was like, hey, when can you start? I was like, I can start tomorrow. And I did. I started the next day. And I come out, and they're like, and my buddy's like, how'd the interview go? I said, I start tomorrow. Like, you got hired today? I was like, yep. Had my little Toys R Us red shirt that they gave me, and I reported the next day. And I worked there for about like a year and a half, and I loved it. It was great. We used in the bike department. We had guys who worked in the back who just built bikes. They were never on the floor, just built bikes. We once had a return power wheel, and we subbed out. We like put extra battery packs in there. We did some finagling with the motors, and we had that thing going for like 15 miles an hour. I think we would jump ramps with it when the store was closed. Those were awesome. Whenever I'd have to go to the R zone because I couldn't play video games, I'd have to walk people over to a register. Or I couldn't ring up the video games. I had to walk them over to a register. So I would just spend my time there playing video games with people. I would just dominate people in Madden, just on the PlayStation 2 display, just whooping little kids' ass in Madden, making myself feel good. But yeah, we're going to Toys R Us like to share some good memories. My manager, Jeff, he's only a few years older than me, though he looks like 20 years older than me. Jeff, you're old. You look old. By the way, you can check his stuff out. He does goingfor2.com. I used to write for him, but sports depresses me these days because my teams always suck. But I used to write some fun articles for his website. But going for 2.com, if you want fantasy advice, check out Jeff's site, and you'll see how old he looks. But as compared to me. But yeah, I made friends with him, and being friends with him, he introduced me to a bunch of his friends. So I've got lifelong friends from working at Toys R Us, of people who I worked with, but also friends of friends that I met working for the company. It was just a great company to work for, and I do miss that Toys R Us isn't around anymore. More so for taking my kids to Toys R Us. Like Sean used to love going when he was a little kid. And then Bowie, he's gone to Toys R Us. I'm sorry, once. One time when we went to Japan, and he didn't even know what Toys R Us is because he was a toddler. But he just being in a giant toy store, he loved it. He's just looking at all the dinosaurs, looking at the cars, looking at the figures. He was just going from place to place, just like some kid in some sort of store that they like. I don't know what you call it, but no, he's just having a ball. He did not want to leave. Like, we spent like an hour at the Toys R Us. And then when we left, he was just distraught, like we killed his puppy or something like that. He was just so upset that we were leaving Toys R Us because he just absolutely loved it. So we need that back. We need a place like that where a kid can be a kid, because you don't want to grow up, because if you did, you wouldn't be a Toys R Us kid anymore. We need that back just for like that magical just space for kids to go. Like, even like, I would just love going as a kid if I didn't like, because a lot of times my dad would take me when I was a little kid, because I'd be looking for, like, I remember I was on the hunt for the Dark Knight Legends figures, the Nightwing. It took me forever to find that. The yellow and blue Wolverine, again, another thing. And just going to Toys R Us, even if I didn't find those figures I was looking for, just going to Toys R Us is magical. I just loved going as a kid, just to browse around, because even if I didn't find what I was there to look for as a kid, I just liked being there and looking at all the toys, looking at all the video games, the bikes and trains, the video games. It's the biggest toy store there is, or was. But yeah, so I mean, we miss Toys R Us, and one of you billionaires, like, gotta bring it back. It will make money. It might lose money the first couple of years, but it'll eventually make money. You can hire me as your CEO. I will make it make money. I'll make it right. But yeah, just don't buy it to make profit for a stupid hedge fund. Just run it as its own singular business or a part of your bigger business that makes money. Don't bank everything off the profits of Toys R Us or KB Toys like these stupid hedge fund people did. But if you bring it back as a store, as a retail store, it will make money eventually. It will do well, and just the world will be a better place with more Toys R Us. But yeah, that's all I have to say on this Dadcast about Toys R Us. Again, rest in peace, Psycho Sid, Sid Justice, Sid Vicious. We will miss you in the wrestling world. But yeah, as always, have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Share this video if you'd like it. And if you go check out Going for Two, tell Jeff Josh sent you. Take it easy. Bye.